Mayor Butt, Mayor Butt, I'm trying to bring you in as a panelist if you're there. Please press the button.
Anybody there?
We're here.
Okay.
I just have Dennis and Claudia so far.
Still here.
Claudia, Gail, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, so we have a quorum, Madam Clerk. You ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, welcome folks to the open session to hear public comment before closed session. Will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Bates is absent. Councilmember Jimenez,
Presente.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Martinez,
Here.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Here.
Councilmember Willis is absent, and Mayor Butt.
Here. Would you read the closed session items, please?
Yes, this evening during closed session, the council will discuss the following items: conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Sprawl Death et al. Versus City of Richmond, the Giddyville Rancheria of California et al. Versus the United States of America et al., North Coast Rivers Alliance et al., Point Melody Alliance et al. Versus City of Richmond. Under conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, there are 3 cases.
Okay, do you have any public speakers?
And let's see. I do not see any public speakers.
Okay, well, with that, I think we're adjourned to closed session.
Thank you.
Melvin, they went to closed session.
All right, I'll be on my way in.
Okay.
I think we may have a quorum. I can't see everybody, but I see 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a quorum. Madam Clerk, are you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, welcome everyone to the special meeting of the Richmond City Council. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Bates? Councilmember Bates is absent. Councilmember Jimenez?
Presente.
Councilmember Johnson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Martinez? Vice Mayor Martinez? Okay, he's absent for roll call. Councilmember McLaughlin?
Presente. Practicing my Spanish.
Councilmember Willis?
Here.
And Mayor Butt.
Here. Would you play the public comment instructional video, please?
Yes.
And I might add, we do not have open forum tonight, right?
No open forum.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted via Zoom pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Urgency Measure Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. The mayor will call upon council members, staff, and other guest speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Council members, staff, and guest speakers participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Community members participating via Zoom wishing to speak should use the raised hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the mayor or city clerk will call upon them at the appropriate time. Community members will have up to 2 minutes to speak, 3 minutes for public hearings. After the speaker's time expires, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Community members participating via phone will be called upon to speak by the last 4 digits of their phone number. Public input and participation are of the utmost importance to the City of Richmond City Council. Therefore, it is important for public speakers to be ready to address the council when called upon. Public speakers are requested to state their names and city of residence, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received before and during the meeting in accordance with the COVID-19 public comment guidelines printed on the meeting agenda will be entered into the record and published at the clerk's office webpage. If authors of written correspondence would also like to speak on the item, they should raise their hand when prompted by the mayor, and the city clerk will call upon them at the appropriate time. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. The meeting can be seen on KCRT's TV channel and is being streamed on Zoom, YouTube, and kcrt.com. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the City of Richmond City Council.
Debido a COVID-19, esta reunión se llevará a cabo a través de Zoom en conformidad con las provisiones de la medida de urgencia del gobernador de la Ley de la Asamblea 361, que suspende ciertos requisitos de la Ley Brown. El alcalde llamará a los concejales, a los empleados de la ciudad y a otros invitados a hablar por nombre. Por favor, hable claramente y diga su nombre antes de dar su comentario. Se recuerda a los concejales, empleados de la ciudad y otros invitados participando a través de Zoom con sus cámaras encendidas que sus actividades son visibles al público. Miembros de la comunidad participando a través de Zoom que deseen hablar deberían de usar la función levantar la mano, en inglés raise hand, o marcar *9 si están participando por teléfono. El alcalde y la secretaria municipal llamarán a los oradores en el momento apropiado. Miembros de la comunidad tendrán hasta 2 minutos para hablar y 3 minutos para temas de audiencias públicas. Después de que se expire el tiempo de orador, se le bajará la mano y el micrófono será silenciado. Miembros de la comunidad participando por teléfono serán llamados para su turno usando los últimos 4 dígitos de su número de teléfono. Los comentarios y la participación del público son de suma importancia para el Consejo Municipal. Por lo tanto, es importante que los oradores públicos estén listos para dar sus comentarios al Consejo Municipal cuando sean llamados. Se pide que los oradores públicos indiquen sus nombres y ciudad de residencia, pero proveer dicha información es voluntario. Comentarios escritos recibidos antes y durante la reunión, de acuerdo con las reglas designadas para comentario público durante el COVID-19, imprimidos en la agenda de la reunión, serán ingresados en el registro y se publicarán en la página web de la Secretaría Municipal. Si los autores de la correspondencia escrita también desean hablar sobre el tema, deberían levantar la mano cuando sea pedido por el alcalde, y la Secretaría Municipal los llamará en el momento apropiado. Se realizará una votación nominal para todos los puntos de acción. La reunión se podrá ver en el canal de televisión de KCRT y también se transmitirá en Zoom, YouTube y kcrt.com. Gracias por participar en una reunión de Consejo Municipal de la ciudad de Richmond.
Okay, next item is statement of conflict of interest. Does anybody have one? Apparently not. Agenda review. We only have one thing on the agenda. Does somebody want to move it up or change it? I guess not. Next item is report from the city attorney of final decisions made during closed session.
The closed session, we discussed the various cases related to Point Malati. We gave a report on exposure, and there's no reportable action taken.
Okay, thank you. Next item is report from the city manager.
This evening, I would like to announce that the city was awarded a grant from the state of California. I have sent all of you an email via BCC and will ensure that it is included in the weekly report. The grant funding in excess of $4 million is going to allow us to sunset the encampment at Castro, utilizing a housing first strategy with full supportive housing. And I would in particular like to thank Lena Velasco, Community Development Director, and Michelle Milam, Crime Prevention Manager, for their steadfast commitment to serving the city of Richmond and for particularly working diligently to serve all of our residents, especially those that are unhoused, in collaboration with CORE and many nonprofit organizations. Thank you.
And the next and final item is item M1. Would you read that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, item M1 is to receive a report and discuss the financial feasibility of the proposed Windhaven Legacy Point Malati project and the risk posed to the city by the formation of a community facilities district.
Okay, thank you. I assume we have a staff report.
Well, briefly, Mayor, Joe Leach, Public Works Director. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. We did attach a staff report to this agenda, but I will introduce Mark Northcross. He's a financial consultant that is leading the team of consultants, professionals that are working through the process of forming the community facilities district as it relates to the Point Malati development. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark and his team.
Thank you, Joe. We have provided a lot of material in the agenda package. Councilmember Jimenez asked a lot of great questions, and we provided the best answers we could. There's a slide deck in the agenda package, as well as other material. We do have yet another slide deck, short one, 11 slides, that tries to pull all this together and summarize it. So with the, deferring to the mayor and Shasta Curl, my boss here as a city manager, I'd like to share the screen and go through the overview slide deck, if that's okay. All right, so let me see if I can press the right buttons in Zoom, get to the right window. And I think I did. Okay. This particular slide deck focuses on the fiscal impact and we'll try to do it in a concise way, but deal with all the pros and cons of this. Point Mulati will have a positive fiscal impact on the general fund at build out.
Sorry, Mark, to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. Can you zoom that a little bit more?
Yeah, okay. No problems.
Thank
How's
you.
that look?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. Will Dan, the city's consultant on our team for preparing for the CFD formation, is also a fiscal consultant. Will Dan took the material that was done in 2020, particularly the city's own fiscal impact model that was developed by BAE, of review of the EPS study, which was funded by SunCal, and they adapted that to the proposed product mix as we know it now from SunCal and the Integra home sale price valuation study as of its revision on February 7th, okay? The conclusion, again, I want to say this is at build out, $7.5 million per year positive impact to the city's general fund. Then I want to move down to the next bullet, a really important one. There was another report that staff has seen and I have seen, as well as the Wildan team, by Strategic Economics reviewing the EPS study, coming to a different conclusion, a different model. We can talk about that later. We put in the product mix as we know it now from SunCal, and again use the Integra home sales price numbers into the Strategic Economics model, and we came up with a 3.275 million per year positive impact, again at build out. So I'd like to go to a slide to graphically illustrate this. The next slide. There are 4 bars up there. 3 of them are positive, 1 is negative, okay? The negative one in orange is the Strategic Economics as it was presented in 2020. It was negative by about 6 million a year at build out. The BAE peer review of EPS came out with 6 million and change per year positive. Plugging in the Integra home sales prices and the current product mix kicks it up to 7.5 million a year. If we try to marry Strategic Economics with Integra, we came up with the teal color, which is 3 million and change per year, positive. So we can go back to the slide later. People want to talk about it, really understand that. Okay, the city can rely on the Integra valuation study. Why do I say that? They are a highly qualified national firm. They have offices in both San Francisco and Sacramento. Very important, Integra works for the city, not the developer. Equally important, this firm does a lot of work for disclosure information for municipal bond issues. That is under the aegis of the SEC. And that means, just cutting to the chase, you gotta be really conservative when you come up with any projections. If you may be looking at the SEC telling you gave investors bad information. So Integra is national, they are conservative. And what we're doing now, what I'm doing now is part of our own SEC compliance. I gotta be conservative. Integra's analysis is based on a thorough review of actual sales data for both current developments and resales. Why is that important? It goes back to those dreaded initials, the SEC. For them to deliver any information on sales prices, it has to be based on actual hard data points, which means that as valuable as talking to realtors and getting people's local opinions is, you can't rely on that. You have to use actual real world sales data. Their analysis considered the adverse locational issues, such as proximity to a refinery and to transportation infrastructure. However, we are very likely near the top of a real estate market. And as we'll point out, that raises some questions about making any decisions based on information at the top of a real estate market. Your finance team respects that, okay? This really important point. Point Mulati still has a positive fiscal impact at build out, even if projected using the strategic economic, significantly lower prices, okay? So let's move on down here. The near-term fiscal impact of Point Mulati is likely to be negative, okay? Why? Once the first occupancies take place, the cost of police and fire operations for the facilities in Point Mulati need to be funded. And in my own words, I call it all or nothing, 5.35 million per year. And I see Councilmember Martinez has his hand up. Councilmember, please.
Yeah, back on the last slide, you were mentioning the positive fiscal impact with build out using significantly lower strategic economic sales prices. Are these prices I guess what I'm wanting is numbers. I mean, I just have
basically ballpark, council member. I would say their numbers are 30 to 40% lower than Integra's, and they were not based. And I want to say this respectively because they are a very highly respected firm. Okay, let's get that clear.
I'm sure all of them are.
Yeah, but they are not based on actual sales points. If they were, they didn't mention it in their report. So from that standpoint, it's not something that in my role I can rely on. And I appreciate the need to be conservative on this for multiple reasons. But I got to stick with sales data, even if we want to take the sales data and say, hey, we think we're at the top of the market. Let's give it a haircut. What if prices go down a whole lot? That I can do. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, well, I'm ready to see what it looks like with the haircut.
Okay, I understand, sir. I understand. Can I keep going here?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So the reason I have a negative fiscal impact is we need to pay full freight on public safety from the time we get the first set of occupancies out there. So guess what? Maybe you have 100 homes and pro rata based on build out, it's a positive fiscal impact, but not when the 100 homes are requiring $5 million a year in public safety expenses. So, and that's coming from your staff. They did a lot of work on this. So if there's questions on that, I invite you to talk to your staff on that one. But they spent a lot of time on that question. The district consequently will need to start generating enough revenue to cover these costs. Revenues will exceed expenditures including paying full freight on the 5 million when we get about 600 units occupied. Okay, so we call that the crossover point. You got to get 600 units occupied before you can cover the full 5 million and change. When you reach that crossover, depends on how fast units sell. It goes to, again, the question that a number of council members have had about the absorption rate. We're going to address that. The faster the absorption, the faster you get to crossover and fiscal positive, the longer it takes to get to fiscal positive. In a favorable market, again, that's a SunCal 7-year absorption they are using. You get there in 2 years. Again, I want to thank the council members for asking for 30-year cash flows. We've done that. 12 years on a 30-year absorption is when we get to crossover point, okay? 12 years, and that's a long time. And how do you mitigate that risk? And that's what the next slide is about. Again, a 30-year build out results in crossover occurring about 12 years from the first construction. So how do you mitigate it? We have an idea. We are proposing it to the council and to the community. And in fact, this has been talked about before.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you a clarifying question.
Sure, sir.
I'm, not seeing any graphs or anything here. I'm confused about the cash flows that you're talking about. So let's assume we close this deal in 90 days, less than 90 days, and SunCal takes possession in May of 2022. Okay. So have you predicted any expenses for fire and police in this year, 2022?
No, that's a
Oh, okay,
great
all right.
question, Mayor. But what we
Okay,
looked at is,
how
go ahead.
about 2023?
No, we don't show in our analysis
When do you
public
start?
safety
When do you
expenses
start?
until you got occupied homes.
Okay, when do you start accruing expenses for fire and police?
When you have occupied homes in our analysis, and I don't, and by saying that, I don't want to say there aren't expenses in the interim.
Well, no, but what year would that be?
We're assuming that it'll be at least 2 years before home construction can start. We do have those numbers in the giant agenda package.
Yeah.
I've got some graphs coming up, Mayor, and
okay, well, I'll wait and see it, but I think it's really critical. When you're talking about $5-point-something million a year, it's really critical when you start booking that. So go ahead.
No, we don't book it until we got occupancies out there in our assumptions. Okay, but yeah, got it. So we're assuming that you take your 22.5 million you get from SunCal and you fund a fiscal security fund to cover part of the cost of the negative interim near-term fiscal impact. In addition, driven by the fact that we did this analysis at the request of our council, we've gone back to SunCal and said, we have got a negative interim fiscal impact and you got to help us deal with it. And so they put $10 million on the table in the form of a special tax levy on their property, $2 million a year for 5 years. So in addition to the 22.5 million, we've got up to 10 million by taxing SunCal. So we did analysis using both of those mitigating sources of funds to basically reimburse the general fund for years in which we have a negative fiscal impact before we reach the crossover point. In addition, there is a giant spreadsheet at the request of Councilmember Jimenez that I'm happy to go through later on the long-term Belarus bond issue, debt service cash flows, and special tax levies. What that analysis showed, and again, thank you, Councilman.
If I may, through the chair,
please.
This tax levy from SunCal, that would be part of the Belarus?
Bingo.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, I want to thank Councilmember Jimenez on the doing the deep cash flow on the debt service, because what we found is that if the financing plan and the DDA basically requires us to fund $100 million in net proceeds for infrastructure for SunCal and Point Melati, if we stick to that number, there's a lot of surplus taxes on the table. It may amount to several $1 million a year. There's a way that can be used for facilities and services that benefit the entire city. We did not count that money in this fiscal analysis, and we can talk about that. I like to go to some graphics here, and the mayor is setting me up really well for that. This is what your fiscal security fund looks like on the optimistic, I'll call it, this is the SunCal scenario. It's a 7-year build out. I know we want to get way more conservative, and we will, but let's look at this one first. Crossover in 2027, basically 1,450 units at 7 years is you're building and you're occupying 200 and change per year. Any negative fiscal impact is fully mitigated during build out. This is the fund balance on the left in the fiscal security fund. You see it goes down a little bit, then it starts coming back up. When you reach crossover, presumably you could release that money for general purposes for the city of Richmond. The column on the right shows the total inflows into this fund and the total outflows. Inflows are in blue, outflows are in the orangey umber color. The deep blue is the 22.5 million from SunCal. The baby blue is the SunCal special tax money. The little thin green line is, we looked at your EPS BAE studies counted your property transfer tax from home buyer to a home buyer. It did not count the one time when SunCal buys the property or SunCal sells to merchant builders. So it's not much money. It's a little thin green line. It doesn't change the conclusions, but we threw it in there. So this obviously looks good, but it's the aggressive build out. Let's go to 15 years and we will get to 30 years. 15 years crossovers in 2033. It takes longer to get to that crossover point. It's 97 units a year. But again, the fiscal impact is fully mitigated. Look at the fund. It stays there, goes down and comes back up. The blue bar is not quite as bigger than the orange bar as in the prior slide, but it's still a lot bigger. Let's go to 30 years, okay, where the rubber meets the road. And I want to say, I'll get to a slide on this. I feel like this is a good, it's very conservative, but you want to be very conservative. This is a good scenario to use for being conservative. And we had no idea that it would work on the fiscal fund, but it does. It's only 48 units a year for 30 years. It's fully mitigated. Now you see the difference here. Look at these bars. You nearly wipe out your fiscal security fund. Okay, telling the truth here. 30 years, it gets pretty small. It gets down to about $3 million. And the blue stack here is only a little bigger than the orange stack, but it's still bigger. So on a 30-year absorption, I would say, being fair, we skate by. It works out. And that is, I would say, why do I say this is conservative? Having a tough real estate market for 30 years is a scenario, God willing, we do not see in the Bay Area. Those are hard times. Before I move on to the next slide, let me pause here for questions, as I think, the first big question is 22.5 million. We're talking about encumbering it in order to address any interim negative fiscal impact from Point Melati. And, that's a policy decision. And that's the recommendation from your consultant. In order to get to a solid, safe fiscal impact, not only at build out, but however long it takes to build out, in my opinion, that's what you need to do. And I see Councilmember Jimenez has her hand up.
Thank you for the information. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Fiscal Consult, for the work that you had done to answer my question and analysis. I wish this material would have been provided more than one day for us to be able to review it, but I am glad we had some information here. However, there are some things that we still need more information. First of all, I want to say that using the $22 million, it will be a subsidy of Richmond to a high-end development. And I say that because we could use that money to provide other services in our community instead of subsidizing the high-end development. So I just want to make clear that this is my thought. And we will have to discuss that more in terms of like the policy discussion. But first, in your response, you mentioned that city staff has done a detailed analysis of the operating costs for the combined police and fire station in Point Molari. And that analysis was attached, but I didn't see it. It will be good to have a spreadsheet in Excel, all costs associated with a new fire station of 3 shifts and a new police station of a new beat of 1 sergeant and 5 officers. And also, I would like that the city staff, and I think Lina can provide us with the list of the fees normally a developer will pay for a project compared with the fees that some call will pay for this project and what fees has been waived in this project. Second, the expenses and revenue under various assumptions is not that clear. Asserting that over time, everything increased by 3%, I don't think it could be safe. Is inflation in public sector labor costs goes up 2.5 or 3% per year, starting from right now. Operation costs for the Morari Fire and Police Station will be over 8 million a year in 15 years and 12 million in 30 years. Annual revenue calculation don't show how do you come up with the two numbers presented, the 13.7 million in net revenue and then the 12.9 million. I would like to see if we can get an spreadsheet in Excel that shows every single calculation that went into that analysis. Third, the analysis is saying that condominiums are going to be easily sold for 1.3 million, approximately 875 per square foot. And in fact, the Waterline project, which is beautiful, sold for 410 up to 630 square foot. And Village 29 in El Cerrito, which is the one also that the analysis show, it's selling for 650 or 700 square foot. So I just, I want to point out that I don't see real arguments for thinking that the condominiums, not the houses, I think the houses are in good price. We can sell at 870 square foot, and that is a safe assumption. We also need to ask ourselves why the Terminal 1 project that promised the city to build 350 units. Most of the condominiums had not been built, and the developer want to change their project completely. And I don't know if you have been looking into their analysis as well. It's quite interesting and quite contradictory of what I am seeing here in this analysis. Also, there is a mention that the city doesn't have an absorption study for Pomolari at this time, but however, some CAL has commissioned such work for absorption consultants, but consider that information confidential. I think we need to see such a study before we move forward with any negotiation. We need to kind of like have the real numbers here. And finally, you are the consultants, and you did the 3-year cash flow analysis, and you put the 7 years analysis, which is the SunCal plan, the 15 years and 30 years. You mentioned that the 15 years is conservative and the 30-year more conservative. And my question is, what is the time frame you are recommending to the city, and why? And I just wanted to end with my 5 minutes that I have, that this is not a typical housing development project. We are having to build a fire and a police station if we want to build the project. Otherwise, we cannot do it. This is a requirement. We are starting with a high cost, over $5 million or more in operational costs per year that will increment over time. We want to make sure that we have the right information to have a fair negotiation with SunCal, and make sure SunCal know that Whitehaven LLC assumes the total shortfall of the project for the time it will occur. And I repeat it, what I don't want is to have a high-cost housing project that gets subsidized by current residents. So the thing about SunCal coming out with $10 million, I don't think like why they come out with that when we don't have all the numbers that we need. they are saying that getting the project and all the infrastructure in the 7 years assumption and the 7 years built out, we will have to start very soon. But I don't see how they can get done the bonds in 2023. So it seems that 2025 seems more reasonable to start. So thank you, and I end here.
Thank you, Council Member. Great set of questions. I think I remember most of them. And to start with the inflation question, which is clearly from us technical people is the deeper question. What you find when you run numbers is inflation only really changes your conclusions when you assume a difference in the inflation rate between revenues and expenditures. What we have had for the last 20 plus years is that revenues and expenditures in cities have actually been pretty darn close. But if for some reason you end up in a situation where expenses are skyrocketing and revenues aren't, then you're going to end up in a situation where your adverse fiscal impact is made worse. Okay. But the practices in the world of fiscal impact analysis, which we don't do, we're relying on other people. We do bond stuff, but we touch on it, is to use what they call nominal dollars, not to include inflation. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do because I'm not in that business. But and to get a inflation-sensitive fiscal impact model, the city would need to retain someone like BAE or whomever to go do that. And I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do, but just that we'd have to retain somebody to go do that. And it's a different kind of analysis.
And Mark, do you mind if I jump in a bit?
Please.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, Mike, please.
Of course. Yes, honorable members of the council, Mike Medvey with Wildan Financial Services. We are your special tax consultant. We also do fiscal impact analyses. Our peers include firms like DPFG, who is working for the developer. BAE is another one of our peers who does fiscal impact analyses. And EPS is another firm that does fiscal impact analyses. I'm pretty sure that each one of the firms has done hundreds. I myself have done quite a few. I think, the idea of doing an inflation sensitive fiscal impact analysis is not so much whether it can be done, it's whether the projection of inflation is something that's within our capabilities, or really any firm's capabilities. I think whenever there are analyses done on how good is anybody in the country at predicting what inflation is going to be, not in the near term, but over a period of 15, 20, 30 years. I mean, it's just not possible. And adding to that, as Mark mentioned, if you assume that costs and revenues go up at the same rate, that's a pretty safe assumption, because there are economic pressures that keep the cost and the revenue inflation in line with each other approximately. There are periods where one might go up and the other one goes down, but because the money that's used to pay for things is also the money that those firms use to spend on things. The costs tend to match the revenues pretty closely, because it's all a connected economy. That's all I had to say on that subject.
Thanks.
Okay, let's keep moving here.
Okay, Councilmember Jimenez also had a question on the valuation. Eric Siegel from Integra is on the call. And Eric, can I ask you to address Councilmember Jimenez's question?
Sure, and I appreciate the questions and the comments. As Mark mentioned at the beginning, obviously I'm just one of the consultants hired for the city to look at this project. I'm not an advocate for the development or the developer or anything. I think, Councilmember, you did have a good question with respect to pricing and what we're seeing in the market. We're often tasked, we often come in later in the process when the financing program is underway and the facilities district is formed and they're going to be going towards a bond sale, and we analyze the project. It's usually underway at that time. The challenging thing is always having to imagine something in place that isn't there. So in this instance, we're looking at this project not as it sits today, but imagining, as Mark alluded to, it build out with 1,450 residential units of condos, homes, multifamily, non-residential uses, and how that might look in the future. So good question with respect to home pricing. As Mark alluded to, there's a tremendous amount of redevelopment throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. In fact, given the scarcity of land, most projects have RE in front of the development term. I'm sure you get the Business Journal emails daily like I do, but almost everything you see now is former non-residential uses being converted to residential. The way trends have been going, some developers are considering, instead of building for sale product, they're considering for rent, because the multifamily market has actually been recovering fast from the COVID pandemic in a lot of the urban centers. So there's been a high push for rent. With respect to pricing and price per square foot, you're right, these the numbers that we see and kind of what we were thinking in terms of what this will be at build out reflects a condition that is, again, discernibly different. We kind of see this similar to some other projects. It kind of falls under the master plan, or a much larger scale project than many of the infill or small scale projects, and larger developments tend to have more project identity and draw more market participants, and market participants being multiple builders that not only compete with each other, but being able to compete draws more attention to the project. So again, we're just looking at the best information available and the trends that have been going in the market. You asked some good questions last time we had the chance to speak with respect to what may happen with interest rates and how that could affect pricing. And again, that's all stuff we're just continuing to watch. Obviously, the world is changing daily and hourly now. So hopefully that helped, Mark.
Great, thank you. Then, Councilmember, you asked about, of the three scenarios, which one would I use? I'm actually saying there's two of them I would use. If I'm Anil and Belinda and we're doing budget forecasting for the city, I would use the 15-year. On the other hand, if I am on the city council or the city manager, I want to know that we have a contingency plan to deal with a 30-year. The exit strategy, things go wrong, what's our contingency? So I would say 15-year planning what the budget impact is likely to be. That's a conservative scenario. It's reasonably conservative. I'd use that. But I sure want to know that we got a contingency. We got a solution to deal with this one. And we put an idea on the table, and we aren't saying this is good public policy or not, but this is that idea of using the 22.5 million is what really deals with this contingency. So I want to again be respectful to that's may not be something that people want to do, but that's how you deal with the contingency. With that, one other, I'm going to go step for the next slide on the absorption study. Cut to the chase here. If we had an absorption study, I would be advising staff and our electeds to not rely on it because it's being done near the top of the market. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. So this is what this slide is about. we are likely near the top of the market. It's at least 2 years and maybe 3 years before homes could actually be constructed in Point Melati for multiple reasons, not just the events of the last few days. We may be in a very different real estate market. Strategic analysis on Point Melati should not be based on the top of the real estate market. And again, I want to support the council members. Absorption is best postulated. And by postulated, I use that word carefully. It's not estimated, it's not projected. You're grabbing a very conservative scenario out of the air, so to speak, 30 years. And you're assuming that build out period and saying, what's that look like? How do we deal with it? So that, out of that came the idea for a fiscal security fund so you could really deal with a 30-year worst case scenario. So that is how we got there. And our electeds had a role in that. I do want to address another potential source of positive fiscal impact, surplus taxes from the CFD. I mentioned that earlier. It depends on a number of factors. One of the reasons we didn't include it in the analysis, I don't feel it's like appropriate given all the assumptions you have to be made, but there's potentially serious money on the table. The taxes inflate at 2% a year. If you're funding $100 million in infrastructure costs for Point Melati as specified in the DDA financing plan, and based on what we're seeing now, there's extra money on the table. What could you do with it if it's available? Public facility construction throughout the city as provided for in your CFD formation documents. Brian Forbath, our bond counsel, is on the call. He can address the legal requirements for doing that. Infrastructure maintenance within the district. Eligible services, like example, police and fire, not just in Point Melati, but throughout the city. Obviously, any such expenditure would be subject to policy direction from City Council. But we want to make sure that staff and electeds are aware of that. And Councilmember Martinez, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. Are you saying that after Point Melati pays for the building and the construction of the fire and the police station, and they pay for the maintenance and the staffing, there'll still be $4 million left?
Yeah, basically if you do in fact, Councilmember Jimenez gave an example. She was applying, I think, a 3% inflation rate to the $5 million in police and fire costs and got up to $8 million. No surprise. Applying a 2% inflator to a $9 million tax base over, a couple of decades, you get some really big numbers coming out there. They're way bigger than the $100 million in bonds and debt service, and including the maintenance for everything that's required in the DDA. So there's a table in your giant agenda package that is very dense with numbers. It's got that in there. We can go there later. I'd like to get through the rest of the slide deck, council member, and we can talk about that. But there is potential here. There is significant upside financially for the city in the long run. So
did you provide a cost analysis for the fire and the police in this document?
That's the city's staff did that. Just the $5.35 million number. Nominal, no inflation in that number, but that's the cost, and that your staff has got that, because I know Belinda and Anil and their colleagues put a lot of time into that. And if I could get through the slide deck, we can go to let them talk about it, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. All right. I want to say council questions have contributed to improving the CFD proposal. So council team, all of you, thank you. Because of questions raised by the council, several changes have been made to the proposed CFD structure. Answering these questions caused the finance team to look at the potential impact of a very slow build out, even if unexpected. We modeled a 30-year. We came up with, hey, we can have some 12 years of negative fiscal impact. Not good. What do we do? So staff negotiated a $10 million contribution from SunCal in response to that. I have to say, in my career, I have never seen a developer put any money like that for this purpose on the table. So that's the first in my career. The development agreement requires no negative fiscal impact in the general fund. We get that. Then we also proposed the fiscal security fund, putting in the 22.5 million, the SunCal 10 million, and we tested it. And a 30-year build out, we get through. So that's how this process so far has, in my opinion, improved the CFD proposal. Last slide. Positive fiscal impact from Point Melati. Again, using the BAE model and the Integra numbers, 7.5 million per year. If we use strategic economic sales prices, but the BAE model, we disagree with the strategic economics actual fiscal model. It's half that. It's like, 3.275 million per year. There is near-term negative fiscal impact. It can be fully mitigated using the 22.5 million in conjunction with the 10 million from SunCal. Plus, as we just talked about, the surplus CFD special taxes after debt service on $100 million in bonds can provide significant funding for other projects and services that benefit the city as a whole. So I'm done with my last slide, and Councilmember Martinez has his hand up. So, sir.
Thank you. Back on the last slide, the previous slide.
You press the right button and get there.
Yeah, you say that staff's negotiated 10 million contribution in special tax levy. So this is from the Melrose, you said. So
yeah, that's it's
so is the Melrose going to be 4 million now?
No. There's what we're going to have there is a ability to tax SunCal and other developer-owned property up to $2 million a year for 5 years. 5 times 2 is 10.
Right, but that doesn't come from the developer. That comes from the purchasers of the house.
No, it comes from it's not on developed property. It's only on developer-owned raw land. So it's only coming out of SunCal or a merchant builder. It will not come out of any homeowner, period. It's coming out of their pocket.
So SunCal's paying all the Melrose?
SunCal pays the Melrose until they sell the property to a homeowner.
This would be above and beyond what is already paid as part of the financing plan. This would be extra on top of all the other special taxes. As Mark said earlier, it is unusual, but it is something that they offered to help mitigate temporary negative fiscal impacts.
Okay, so you're saying that when the house is sold, then the fiscal responsibility goes over to the home buyer.
The responsibility for the Melrose levy, whatever it is per house, goes to the home buyer. Yeah.
Right, including the $1 million for negative fiscal impacts.
No, that never goes to the homeowner. That as Mike is explaining, that tax is written in a way in the tax formula that says this tax is only on property owned by developers. It's not
right, but if the developer sells it, it's no longer the developer's property. So how
well,
let me explain it. Let me explain it further then. When there is a mix of homeowner owned and developer owned property, the homeowner will pay a special tax that they were disclosed for facilities and another special tax to cover services. For the developer owned property, traditionally they would only pay for the facilities, they would not pay for services. And the rationale there is because the product does not have any people living on it, that the services should not be covered. What the developer has done is offered to go above what is traditional and to say we will help fund services as well. In addition to the facilities, we'll also fund services up to $2 million for the first 5 years of the project.
I understand that, but what I don't understand is when does so you're telling me that even after SunCal sells all the property, they still pay on the $10 million bond?
No,
No, Eduardo, the key thing to understand here is that this really only applies when we have a negative fiscal impact, when there aren't enough homes out there, when the property is only, partly developed, which means by definition, once we get 600 out of the 1,400 homes, we're fiscally neutral. So you're sitting out there and when you've got, let's say 200 homes out there, you've got the bulk of the property is owned by SunCal. There is plenty of property to tax out there that doesn't have people living on it to cover the $2 million.
So, and what if we're not fiscally neutral?
after the project is built out,
Yes.
And that's
it's,
a risk to be taking, council member. And that's why we've had BAE and these studies have done, with the exception of strategic economics, have concluded you are going to be fiscally positive at build out. So
well, I think even the more pessimistic studies show a surplus at build out. It's hard to imagine a combination of sales prices for waterfront property that would not result in a fiscal surplus at build out.
Okay. Even with the special circumstances at Point Melati, and the fact that we're actually doing more than just a development, we're actually creating a city separate from Richmond.
Yeah, staff has helped us to analyze all the costs involved in that. In fact, the special tax for services covers the maintenance of any new infrastructure that would be dedicated to the city. So that is a special tax that is part of the CFD. That if you look at it from a financial perspective, it actually comes out of the pocket of the developer in the long term, because every dollar that's used to help fund services for the new infrastructure that's going in is a dollar that's not being used to pay for infrastructure bonds to help them pay for their infrastructure. So that's separate from the fiscal impact, but it also, as far as the scenario that you're describing, we are building a whole lot of new stuff, and that is being covered by the tax for services.
Right. So what I'm seeing is that we're using the city of Richmond to create another city within a city, because it is totally separate, and so it seems like staff is asking us to give up our 22.5 million in land stakes proceeds, and then we're asking the homeowners to keep paying forever for the rest of it, and on top of that, we're selling the condos for $1.3 million, which is not within the income level of anyone living in Richmond, except for maybe the mayor.
I do want to emphasize that the fiscal surplus, we did the fiscal analysis plugging in the very conservative sales numbers. It still yielded a $3 million per year surplus in perpetuity. So even if we had, let's say, a bad period and we were dipping into the $22.5 million to help pay for fire costs while there weren't enough homeowners to generate a fiscal surplus, even in the most conservative scenario, and I would want to emphasize that is conservative. It's not the most likely. It's an unlikely scenario. If we get $3 million per year in perpetuity, then it takes 8 years to earn back that $22.5 million that we spent, and that surplus doesn't stop after 8 years. It goes on forever.
So, how did you get to the 600 units as being the break point?
It's in the giant agenda package. We have that analysis in our slide deck, council member, but it's basically pardon, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You'll be showing that to us later?
We can do that. We can go to that page, and I'm happy to do that. Not right at the moment, because I don't know if you're done, sir, but I know Councilmember McLaughlin's had her hand up for a while. So,
okay. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, through the mayor.
Councilmember McLaughlin, go ahead.
Thank you. So I listened very carefully to this whole presentation and read up on the materials beforehand, and I just made some notes as this presentation was going. So first of all, I want to thank you for the work that was done. I want to thank staff as well as consultants. I want to share my perspective here based on some of these notes I took. So first of all, I think the selling prices are really inflated. I think the costs are deflated. The cost of the fire and police station and the operation and maintenance of that. So I think what we're seeing is an unrealistic scenario in all the scenarios. But I appreciate, especially, you're giving the worst scenario so that we can look at this with open eyes. I think the assumptions are not correct. For example, you're assuming people will be paying 1.3 million for a condo unit with flaring from Chevron in their backyard. You're also assuming that people will pay $1.3 million for condos with a narrow exit and entrance into the site and their inability to have access to services on site. They will have to go off site to get to restaurants, etc., grocery stores. Also, these are 5-story buildings. There are 5-story buildings on the site, and most of them will not even have a view. If somebody was going to pay $1.3 million, I assure you that they would want more than what they're going to get here with all the hazards that are associated with it. So to get now onto the risk, it's obvious to me that there is risk to the general fund. I mean, the absorption rates are likely to be very, very slow based on the reasons that I just stated, the refinery, the narrow exit, the 5-story building, and I think that slow absorption rate is going to even make the risk to the general fund even further. And this project was sold to the previous city council based on zero risk. And so here we have a contradiction coming up. And the fact is that our general fund will be put to very major risk and substantial risk. And the solution that staff and consultants are stating is, to me, a real non-starter. To utilize the $22.5 million that we would be getting as for selling the property, which was sold to the community, sold to the city council as, oh, we're going to get $22.5 million. Now it's being stated that this will be part of the Fiscal Security Fund. And as Councilmember Jimenez rightly stated, this will be a subsidy for high-end housing. In addition, you talk about us being at the top of the market, which is the case, and it doesn't stay. And I think you clearly warned us about that. This is likely not going to continue. Prices don't keep rising forever. So we're going to have a whole different perspective, even in the worst case scenario, for the prices of homes and what they would sell at. And I also want to state that the DDA, and this has been stated, that says if there is any risk to the general fund, or that any financing cannot create a risk or obligate the general fund in any way. And again, I think there is substantial risk. And we, frankly, in the city of Richmond, have so many challenges, so many community needs. For us to put our community at risk by subsidizing a high-end housing and by putting our general fund in a negative situation for years, and who knows that, the 30-year worst case scenario could even extend beyond 30 years, and the negative impact to our general fund is not acceptable in my view. So while I really appreciate what staff is saying, trying to make this work, I just don't see how it pencils out. And as somebody who's standing for our community, and I believe we all should be standing for our community, this financing mechanism for this project puts our community last. And it puts trying to make a bad scenario work. And I just don't think it pencils out in any way, shape, or form. And I just don't see how we, a city council, can put our general fund at any risk at all. That's all I'm saying. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions from council members? I had one question. And that is, I know you all have talked about negotiating this with the developer and that with the developer. I assume the developer has seen what you're recommending. Is that true?
Yes, and
Are they in agreement with it?
they put the $10 million. Yes, they are in agreement with it.
Well,
And-
the whole thing. I mean, do they agree with with your analysis and
I don't know if they agree with the analysis or not, but where the agreement needs to be is on the
in terms of the way you're manipulating the money to raise certain amounts by, the $10 million fund and that.
Yeah, SunCal accepts that there is a possibility of a negative interim fiscal impact. Okay, and that's why they put that money on the table. And the tax formula, the legal documents that we would present, if the council wants to go forward with a resolution of intent, as we've discussed, would include that position in, and SunCal certainly understands that.
Well, I realize I can't put words in their mouth, but when you make your final recommendations on this and we vote on it, and I ask a representative from SunCal if they, if they agree, if they're prepared to go forward with it, is their answer going to be yes?
Right now,
Mark, sorry to interrupt, but we do have a representative from SunCal in the public forum.
Oh, excellent.
Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to wait
Well,
till public forum,
I'd like to bring them in as a panelist and ask them that question. Who do we have here?
okay, I think Sue Mark Magstadt is representing SunCal.
Mark Magstadt, that'll work.
Through the chair, actually, this is a point of clarification. It sounds as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, sounds as if the mayor is trying to set up a negotiation with SunCal in public forum.
No, we're not negotiating anything. It's very common when an agency approves a project or approves conditions to ask the applicant if they agree. Happens all the time.
So we can do this with Terminal 1 as well.
You can do it with anything.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Did we find the SunCal person yet?
I'm trying to bring in Mark. He's not accepting the panelist.
So he's not here actually, huh?
Maybe he's away from his computer or his phone.
Okay, well, let's move on. I see Councilmember Bates has his hand up. You have a question?
I guess I have a question and a statement. Councilmember McLaughlin made a statement that the city was subsidizing this project. That is not the way I see it. In other words, by the Belarus, we enable the developer to proceed with a type of development and a funding mechanism. It's not coming out of the general fund of the city. I like for the Mike, Dave, one, to tell this community, is there any subsidy on the part of the city as it relates to funding this project?
I can answer that. I definitely don't see it that way. In fact, the developer's $10 million contribution to really what amounts to the police and fire facilities is a subsidy from the developer to the city's police and fire department. If anything can be called a subsidy, that would be it.
But that's money that is generated by the development, not by the city general fund.
Correct. This project in the official scenario, the one that is agreed upon by all the consultants with all their years of experience, shows about a $9 million surplus to the general fund. This project, those $9 million could be used by the city on anything that it wishes.
Okay, the other question. There's an argument about open space. Now, it's my understanding of the some 300 acres, 200 acres or thereabout is devoted to open space and all of the shoreline. Am I misinterpreting that agreement?
That's also correct. I've seen the site plan, and a very large proportion of this project will be both open space and parkland.
Which includes the Bay Trail, if it goes that direction, and so forth. The last thing I want to say, Mr. Mayor, having supported this project from its inception, this council need to understand that it's not costing the city taxpayers $1. The other thing that is very important is that this project will generate several $1 million that has been alluded to. Not only that, it creates a lot of jobs. We're going to have the building trades out there all over the place building this project. It provides economic development. Once this project is built, there's going to be a substantial amount of property tax. When we go with the business aspect, there's going to be a sales tax. And how someone can turn and say this project is detrimental to the city is totally beyond my recollection and intelligence. This project, when it's completed, will provide jobs, taxes to the city. And what else more do you expect from a project? Now, the last point, Mayor, you talk, not Mayor McLaughlin, you talk about these properties not for sale. Almost every project that we have built in the city of Richmond, there was always a question about, oh, they're not going to sell. We talked about the Shays development. Oh, it's not going to sell. Shays development. We talked about the Toll Brother. We talked about the Brickyard Cove. We talked about Brickyard Landing. We talked about the property in Elsa Brandon, Dietz Crane, the property in North Richmond by the golf course. All of those projects sold, and now they are worth significantly more than what was paid for. And I don't understand the logic of your mathematics. If you don't understand, that's unfortunate. But property is the most valuable aspect that this community possess, individuals possess. And I just want to close with that. I think we ought to stop playing games and look at the benefit to this city. Salaries for employees, your SEIU group, they should be at the table fighting for this project because it enabled revenue to pay their salaries down the road. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, are there other questions? I see Councilmember Jimenez hand up and then McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to just make some few comments after Councilmember Bates mentioned impact. I think like for me and asking all this question was to really see what the impact during the period that we don't break even is going to be to the general fund, right? And this is what the 30 years cash flow analysis is about. It's not true that this project is not going to impact the general fund. It's going to impact the general fund, even with the 7 year, like the best likely scenario. And I think like this is not a project that is And I want to ask Mark, like if he has seen projects like this where we have to be a new fire station and a new police station to be able to build the project and the house. And yeah, as Councilmember Bates mentioned, all of these other projects, but all of these other projects didn't have to build or didn't have that operational cost that we are going to have with this project. And I think for me, more than going forward, is to look at all the information and to take measures so that we don't end up with a shortfall that then put at risk the finances of our community. Even if it's a year, every year we are in this problem of the budget shortfalls, the budget deficits. And every year we are trying to see how we fill that budget. So I think it will be naive and it will be irresponsible for this city council to not look at these questions, to not look at the answers and think that we can move forward just because we want this project. So what we are here is trying to come up with solutions and trying to come up with what is the negotiation we have to do in order to guarantee that we are not putting our community and the budget at risk. And what the information is shown is that it's going to be an impact, whether we like it or not, and that we need to have negotiation about that. And what is our policy direction about what we want to do? We want to use the $22.5 million to put that in the shortfall for how many years? So that, and then is less money that could go to our community for services that are actually most needed, or what we are going to do. So these are the real questions. It's not whether this project is going or not. It's how we approach this to get the real numbers with more information, so we know what is actually the impact in general fund.
Okay,
and
thank
this
you.
is why I am asking for more data. Thank you.
Can we move on to Councilor McLaughlin?
Yeah, I just want to elaborate a little bit further on some of the things said in the presentation. So to explain more, the 7-year build out assumes that 207 units will be built each year. That is so unrealistic. I mean, the water line project took, in order for build out, I think that was 60 units and it took a few years. So that's maybe 20 units a year. That and that project didn't have all the problems associated with it as the Point Melati project does. On the 15-year build out, it assumes 97 units built per year. And again, that's much higher than Waterline. On the 30-year build out, it assumes 48 units built per year. Again, much faster, much more per year that it's assuming than the Waterline project. And this is with a project with a whole lot of problems that are not associated with the Waterline project. So it's really important to understand that. And on the costs of fire and police, we have to pay for that, the operation and maintenance of fire and police from the first unit that is occupied, because we have to have that there. So it's not going to bring in all this tax money when you have one housing unit occupied. And yet we, the council, we, the city, I'm sorry, based on council decision, will have to pay for the operation and maintenance of the police and fire. So ultimately, and I want to say again about this $22.5 million that was said, we're going to get $22.5 million for giving up this land, selling this land. But now it's being suggested that we put it into a fiscal security fund, which will be utilized to help offset the general fund impact, which I don't think it will fully, even with the 10 million in addition from the developer, because the cost is going to be heavy, and we know that the build out is going to take long, even longer than the mid, or I'm inclined to think the worst scenario is likely, or even worse than that is what we can expect. The housing crisis exists. It's not going away. People are just not going to want to pay $1.3 million for a unit with all the associated problems. So I just want to make that clear, Councilmember Bates, that this will have a risk and a detriment to the general fund because of the slow build out, because of the overinflated price, because of the underrated costs, and because of all the problems at the site, where people are not going to want to live in such a site. And so there isn't going to be this rush to live there. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Are there other council members who have questions? I don't see any. So, or do we have public speakers?
Yes,
Yes,
we
we
have
do.
6 or
Would you
7.
call the public speakers, please?
Sure. I have Tenzin, Jeannie Courts, Deborah Bayer, Tarnell Abbott, and Paul Carmen as the first group. I'll start with Tenzin. Tenzin, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Tenzin, if you could please unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. Good evening to everyone. Is this, could I speak in general or just for this particular agenda item?
Just
wanna
for
be-
this item.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I don't have, so thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jeannie Courts. Jeannie, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Jeannie Courts, Richmond resident. The average income in Richmond is $68,000 per year. Supporters of SunCal's current plan are out of touch with housing and other immediate needs of the majority of Richmond residents. Instead of focusing on affordable housing near transit hubs that would help many Richmond families stay in Richmond and bring development, business, and local employment opportunities to our neighborhoods, the focus is on a luxury development using limited city and planning department resources for a highly risky development that will cost struggling Richmond taxpayers who can't dream of buying a home at Point Mulate, but will be subsidizing its wealthy residents. To buy a condo at the target selling price of $1,300,000, you will need an income of $300,000 per year. If your income is $300,000 per year and you paid 30% of it in taxes, that leaves you $210,000. Add on to that your mortgage and HOA fees. How many people do you think will want to spend more than half of their income to live at Point Mulate? The losses for our general fund and bondholders to subsidize people who do not live in Richmond would leave us with a relatively small chance of avoiding significant cumulative losses. The residents of Richmond need to see a 30-year cash flow done other than by Integra in order to protect Richmond families, the people you represent. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Deborah Bayer. Deborah, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Hi, thank you. And I'm Debbie Bayer. And I really want to talk about SunCal for a minute. According to the California Debt Advisory Commission, investors should look closely at the reputation of the development company involved in any Mello-Roos special bond transaction. because the quality of the development and the financial resources of the developer are major sources of credit risk. So investors should look for a proven track record. SunCal falls short in this regard. Their history is littered with bankruptcies, abandoning projects in midstream, and sometimes even going bankrupt, and then repurchasing their own distressed properties at auction for less money than the original purchase price. And they get to pocket the difference. Anyone with computer access can easily bring up these histories of SunCal's bankruptcies. I don't think this is a company that we can trust and we can do business with. The history of developers getting halfway in and then saying, oh, I need these additional, in order to complete it, I need these additional waivers from the city or help from the city. There's a reason that SunCal was voted by the population of Alameda to get off their island. There's a reason that SunCal became bankrupt at Marblehead, at Palmdale, at Oak Knoll. And we really should look at that. In addition, I really appreciate what the advisors have done and what Walden has done to explain the risk of these bonds and how to make it less risky. But I think we should also look at SunCal, our partner.
Time has expired. Thank you. The next speaker is Tarnell Abbott. Tarnell, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Tarnell Abbott, Richmond resident. I'm a former SEIU local chapter vice president. And in my tenure, the city went out on a limb and lost so much money that the only recourse was to lay off 200 people, mostly SEIU people. And it wasn't your faction, Mr. Bates, it was your employees, Mr. Bates, that were laid off. And these were good, hardworking people. No, they were not building trades. They were SEIU, the people who do the work of the city. And they got laid off because the city made some gambles and lost big time. Let's not let that happen again. We cannot risk the future of our city's integrity, wealth, and the wealth in the human people who make the city work. And that's the heart that I speak from. This is a risky development for a whole lot of reasons that have been laid out. And fiscally speaking, $5.3 million per year to fund police and fire isn't going to come out of any hat. It's going to come out of the general fund. And it's not going to come out of Mello-Roos. Mello-Roos will pay for the building and the infrastructure, maybe, hopefully, but maybe not. That's kind of a dicey issue. But those salaries will be ongoing and they will inflate. And we're not gonna. We can hardly keep a workforce. We can hardly afford a workforce right now. I don't believe that the housing market is going to stay up. It's tied into the boom and bust economy that we live in. It went up. It's going to go down.
Time has expired. Thank you. The next speaker is Paul Carmen, and the following group of speakers after that will be Sally Tobin, Jim Hansen, Pam Stello, and Jamin Purcell. Paul Carmen, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Okay, Paul Carmen, Richmond resident. I've listened to Mr. Northcross present 4 times now and have really enjoyed his sharing his expertise on this topic, as well as a balanced approach in discussing the pros and cons of Mello-Roos. I, however, want to give pushback on one issue based on my own reading, and that is his position that these bonds have no effect on the city's bond rating. Mello-Roos bond issues are called overlapping debt for a city. I read that bond rating firms Standard & Poor's and Moody's take overlapping debt very seriously when considering a city's bond rating. I read that there was a couple specific instances where Mello-Roos bonds could trigger a downgrade in Richmond's bond rating. The first is if the total amount of SunCal issue is over 50% of the city's existing direct debt, A rating downgrade should be expected. I don't know how much direct debt that Richmond is carrying right now, but my impression it is not very much. The second instance where SunCal bonds might cause a rating downgrade, as if the people of Richmond want to approve a separate bond for improvements outside Point Mulati, say a road paving or improved street lighting. The combination of the outstanding overlapping debt coupled with this new direct debt could give the rating firms cause to lower city's bond ratings. This is important because you have been told that the DDA offers you no discretion or authority on this CFD formation. However, the DDA explicitly says that the city review of proposed phase planning shall be limited to anything which creates a financial obligation for the city. A reduction in rating making it more expensive for Richmond residents to borrow money is most definitely an obligation. And now we get this bombshell that the $22.5 million in sales price has to get pulled back into the cost of the project. So you could, for example, vote to limit the financing of this project through CFD formation to just $30 million. That's something that is at your discretion.
Time has expired. Thank you. The next speaker will be Sally Tobin. Sally, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Sally Tobin, Richmond resident. News reports document SunCal's business practices in one word: bankruptcy. The parent SunCal company creates limited liability entities for each project. In case of problems with financial backing or lack of tax receipts or unexpected expenses, the entity can declare bankruptcy without affecting the parent company. In New Mexico, land that was purchased by SunCal's subsidiary for $250 million was auctioned for only $148 million after bankruptcy was declared, in the process stiffing New Mexico contractors, service providers, consultants, and attorneys for $6.4 million. This practice creates collateral damage in the form of distressed properties, sometimes graded and eroding, sometimes with non-existent or incomplete streets and sewers and water lines, as in the Marblehead or Oak Knoll developments. SunCal also snaps up distressed properties, as in their purchase of Oak Knoll for $100 million, then going through bankruptcy and repurchasing for $71 million. In addition, SunCal specializes in securing development rights and then flipping by selling pads to home builders. SunCal walks away with their profits, but if the unit sells slowly, tax income for Richmond will be reduced. Richmond is vulnerable. Winehaven LLC can declare bankruptcy at any time, triggered by refinery fire, economic collapse, inadequate financial backing, or the next pandemic. The city will be required to pursue foreclosure. In Palmdale, this process resulted in a 7-year drain on their general fund, and reimbursement is based on the auction price of damaged lots. Richmond's general fund can't afford this risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jim Hansen. Jim, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for taking a deep dive into these financial matters. I think they're really significant. On November 23rd, you voted unanimously to include several basic risk mitigation measures in ECFD negotiation. One was to hire excellent counsel to prepare a full and honest disclosure document, one to pre-fund city expenses, and the other was to require the developer to fund all infrastructure costs before bond funds are released. At the same time, you've been told that the development agreements really limit you in many ways. And I think that's really becoming evident if you read them. Major risk reduction, again, is to require the developer to fund major infrastructure before any bonds are released. But, and this puts cash equity into land and land value. But I'm seeing minuscule SunCal contribution for general fund losses. Nothing about having the developer front the money for the project. Secondly, you were advised about how critical it is to have a good disclosure statement. However, in the development agreement, section 4.2.1.3, it says the city basically has to consider all the developer's comments on any proposed consultant in its hiring decisions, provided, however, the developer shall be entitled to reject at its sole discretion up to 3 consultants in total. So we've got a situation where the good luck getting a full and honest disclosure statement. In this case, we could put the city at risk from lawsuits if this is not fully disclosed. And then lastly, there's infrastructure capacity, which says that that under 3.6.6 that the subject to developer's installation, the city shall undertake all reasonable efforts to preserve sufficient capacity in many areas. This will cost money too.
Thank you. The next speaker is Pam Stello. Pam, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Pam Stello.
Wait, I was just unmuting.
Pam, you can go ahead and start.
Yeah, I can. I thought it was still loading. Sorry.
Okay.
Hello, good evening. I'm very glad we're having this discussion and these analyses. To reiterate Council Jimenez and McLaughlin's points, 1.3 million for a small condo is too high for our city and for Point Mulati. The small condos will be in 5-story buildings, and as noted, with a view of frequent refinery flaring, additionally an explosion about every decade with one narrow road in and out, e.g. Paradise, California, to any moderately informed buyer. What if the condos sell for more realistically 850K? What then is the deficit? The police and fire substations must be built, operational and funded, even if only one home is sold, and the costs reported for the stations are to date underestimated. Not addressed by staff and consultants yet is how does the city avoid the risk of what are realistic worst case scenarios of sales and the actual costs involved. Also, the solution to escrow 22.5 million is itself an impact to our general fund. I just want to make 2 points. Strategic economics findings are critiqued here. I think it would be helpful to invite strategic economics to respond to the points made tonight about their study. 2, if the picture is as financially promising as stated, why isn't or can't SunCal seek their funding on the open market? I believe it's the safest option for the city. We were promised no risk to the city, yet there is financial risk and impacts to the general fund, and the worst case scenarios have not yet been presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jamin Purcell. Jamin, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Yes, thank you for doing this analysis, but I have a real problem with the idea that we're going to put the city's budget at risk for any reason into the future. It feels like it's shirking the duty of the developer and the amount of money that needs to be put in and putting that onto the city in the future. I feel like as a homeowner, this doesn't seem like something I would be interested in supporting, and I don't see how it's going to be something that people are going to want to take advantage of, as is going to be only a few homes that will be able to get through this very thin road that we're going to have to build out in order to try and take advantage of whatever parks or whatnot are there. But the few homes that are actually occupied, they're going to still have to go out for all of their groceries, for most of their restaurants. I mean, this back and forth doesn't seem like a really worthwhile investment for somebody who's moving out there. Maybe it's going to end up more like a retirement village with how long it's going to take to fill out all of these homes. I'm just really concerned that we're going to be putting a risk on the city budget when we were told that we would not be incurring any risk. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more public speakers.
Okay, I think this is the end of this item. We've had presentation, we've had questions by council members, we've had comments from the public, and I see a couple of hands up, but I mean, if you guys are just going to say the same thing, let's go home. I'm hungry. But go ahead, Councilmember Jimenez.
Yeah, I have a final question. You are talking about putting the 22.5 million in land, and then you are also saying that the future homeowners should keep paying forever, that we can make this work. How much, when you talk about additional bonds and additional payments, how much will be for a homeowner who, like how much money a homeowner will be paid annually, including housing, the HOA, and the Melrose ban and other extra bans that you are suggesting here.
And understood the question. The question on the taxes per homeowner, I'm looking for Mike Medvey. Mike, you got the maximum tax rates estimated for, I'll say the condo units, for example?
Yes, well, the maximum tax rate on any unit is all inclusive is 2%.
So how much is that, like, but also 2%, but you are also, and maybe I am confused about that, but you are also suggesting an additional bond or an additional, for this project, not only the Melrose, but an additional one. So including that money, no in percent, like how much will be that a homeowner there will be paying?
The just to give kind of an overall picture, and I can get more, I can pull up more specific numbers with a few minutes, but generally a typical assumption would be that a non-Melrose home would pay 1.2% about of their assessed value, whereas a Melrose home, we set the Melrose rates so that it goes up to 2%. That is all inclusive. It's not inclusive of
Mike,
things like
can I interrupt?
HOA.
Because we're the portion of the 2% that was roughly to be assigned to the Melrose and Point Melotti is about 0.5%. It's about 25% of the 2%, because the underlying overlapping taxes are a shade under 1.5%. So it's about 0.5%, speaking roughly. So you take the home value, let's take up $1 million just for the sake of discussion. That's lower than what Integra, this is estimating, but it's easier for me to do the math in my head. So 2% on $1 million home is $20,000 a year. A quarter of that is going to be $5,000 a year in Melrose taxes.
But you mentioned that additional, you are suggesting an additional tax, an additional bond, not only those, but an additional bond.
That's just on SunCal. It's not on the homeowner. The homeowner is completely exempt from the $2 million a year, $10 million fiscal impact tax. Homeowner does not see that, doesn't touch it in any way.
Okay, so, and then before we end, Councilor Martinez asked you how you come out with the 600 units, and you said that you were going to show that.
I can do that, and I would need to, just a second, go back.
And I also, just kind of like before I finish my time, I really want to get the information that I asked in the spreadsheet in Excel with every single cost, and also that we have even though you said that we should not trust the number, I think it's important to get the absorption study that SunCal has. Thank you.
Okay.
And I will email all of these, so you.
Okay, on the fiscal impact study, the BAE, we'd have to talk to BAE if they want to give you their Excel workbooks on that. And for Councilmember Martinez, let me screen share and see if I can press the right button and get to the right table and take you through it here. So, screen share, excuse me while I talk to myself, make sure I get the right buttons here. Okay, this is actually page, I think, 28 in your agenda package. What we did is take the BAE study and we basically just prorated revenues and expenses by dwelling unit 1,452. Didn't distinguish between you know, this particular unit's going to have more revenue or more expense than the other. Just, this is, you know, very broad brush, but I think it's effective for this level of analysis. And we did it with police and fire and without, because as I explained, the police and fire, it's full freight from day one. You know, it's the $5 million and change. You got 100 homes out there, you're paying $5 million. So to make the numbers work, what we had to do is get to the next slide. Here's on the 7-year. I show the net revenues without police and fire. It looks pretty nice, you know, 200 units. Then you load in full freight on police and fire, you know, you're negative. And this is and obviously in the 7-year piece, you get a turnaround in 2027, and then it starts getting positive and looks, and there you are, the number we projected based on the current product mix and the Integra numbers for sales price, 7.5 million positive at build out. I can keep going a little further here and make sure I press the right buttons. 7-year build out. Okay. 15-year build out. This is not a little, let's even get on the screen. Same drill, you know, only 100 homes built initial phase, paying full freight on the police and fire. Yeah, you got negative fiscal impact. You reach crossover. And to answer Councilmember Martinez's question, you look at crossover, there it is. It's between 580 and 600 and change in units. It's around 600. I'm trying to make my little cursor go around that. And I see Councilmember Martinez has his hand up. So, sir, do we answer your question here? Is this making sense?
Well, you keep the police and fire expenses it's static, and it's not going to be static. I mean, it raises.
Well, we'd have to, again, the point is, yeah, you're right. And Councilmember Jimenez brought the same question. I think everyone has. The question is, do we inflate police and fire, for example, at a different rate than we inflate revenues? And if we don't, we use the same inflation factor, it doesn't change the conclusion. It just makes both sides of the equation numbers.
Well, it's more than inflation. I mean, the police and fire are being raised because the cost of their pension is constantly raising.
Good point. So, can I address that, sir? Because I wrote Councilmember Jimenez's questions had that, and I addressed it. You're absolutely right. But here's the key thing. This is where it gets really tricky, and this is over my head. You would need to get a real fiscal consultant in here. CalPERS is amortizing the unfunded liability on about a 20-year period for most members, which means right now on the amortization schedule, and I think this includes Richmond, your numbers are going up really fast. You're spot on. They're rising way faster than inflation. On the other hand, after 20 years, you don't have any. They're gone. You aren't amortizing the UAL. And at that point in time, they go way down. So your inflation rate goes way down, which means on a 30-year cash flow, we'd have to be factoring in. I'm not saying this is not the right thing to do, but it's complicated. The rapid inflation in police and fire, then once the UAL is amortized, it drops down dramatically. So a long answer, but you're right. But it's, you know, it hurts you for a number of years, then it helps you.
Well, okay, that's I think that's an opinion, but I accept it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mark,
I mean, it wouldn't be sustainable for police and fire expenses to go up by 10% per year. It just wouldn't be possible.
Mark, could you, what this table doesn't show, I know you've shown it elsewhere, you show the deficits, okay, but could you
yeah, we keep
where is that money? No, stay where.
No, let me get to
where that money is being paid from.
Here's we have the cash flow in more detail on the 22.5 million, and the council members, I fully appreciate the policy questions on this. So this is not a recommendation, but it's a statement. If you want to mitigate it, here's how you can. So I show that deposit. I show the SunCal tax money coming in. I show the small property transfer tax that wasn't included in the BAE study. I show the draws to mitigate the adverse fiscal impact, and I show the ending fund balance. Here's the whole cash position for 15 years, including the mitigation. So you can see how it works.
But Mark, the 22.5 million is purchase price paid by the developer.
Yep.
It's not actually general fund money at that point, and it goes into this fund to make this payment. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave.
But wait, fund to make payment?
The security fund, we're creating a security fund. It could become general fund money in the future, but what's happening here is it's going into a security fund, and that's happening because we don't want the general fund monies to be making this payment. So we're putting it in a fund to provide security that if the absorption is slower, and you've put some projections there, this money is available after the 10 million is paid out by SunCal, if there remains a deficit, because the council was very concerned.
No,
there's going to be a deficit.
Dave, in this scenario in 2033, 19 million bucks would be released because we reach crossover. We're fiscally positive. You see the $675,000 positive fiscal, and then there's 19 million in the fund. It gets released for any lawful purpose for the city. We can scroll on down to the 30-year piece. And here is 30 years. I am probably not going to be able to get this all on the screen without making it smaller. And depending on what your reading glass level is, if it's like mine, if I get too small, you will not be able to read it. I think you can get most of it in there. So here's where you see the fund balance starts at 23 million and it ends up at 3,000,004. Okay. So this is the worst case. We're still positive. The general fund is not taking a hit. The security fund's taking a hit. But we funded 12 years of adverse fiscal impact. And, as I said, we skate by on a 30-year amortization, a 30-year absorption.
And each year thereafter, the city gets $7.5 million per year.
Bingo, yeah. And I see Councilmember McLaughlin once again has had her hand up for a while.
I think Bates was there before her, so go ahead, Councilmember Bates, and then McLaughlin.
I just want to reiterate and ask our professionals, does this Melrose cost the city any general fund monies?
No, the only way it costs it money is one of the speakers mentioned, Palmdale, is you get into a really long foreclosure bankruptcy. The general fund has to pursue the remedies. It can cost you a couple $100,000 a year, but you will get fully reimbursed plus interest from the bankruptcy proceedings or the foreclosure.
Is there anywhere in this project?
No, it's not. And this is assuming no bankruptcy or foreclosure. This is just there's the general fund is held whole on the 30 year with the assumptions where I think some council members have challenged that is that obviously this is based on property taxes coming off the Integra values, which I support and believe. But if you don't, you think the sales prices are going to be a lot lower, you're going to reduce the revenue coming in, you're going to change this analysis.
Okay.
But the city's still not on the hook for Melrose, though.
The city is never on the hook for the Melrose beyond pursuing foreclosure remedies.
I understand that. We've done Melrose before. In fact, I think part of the marina may be Melrose. But the other question is, as a developer, I know you don't do that, but most new developments, whether they're in Richmond, Oakland, Fairfield aware the overwhelming number of new residents do not come from that city. They are from basically outside of that jurisdiction. Do you have any analysis in that regard?
I don't know if Eric Siegel was still on the call or appraiser, but Eric, could you address the council member's question?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, overwhelmingly, a lot of the developments we see are just as you described. You know, there's almost so much coastline and so much development proximate to the coast. Historically speaking, that drives up home prices and it pushes people to seek options elsewhere. I've worked on developments obviously throughout Central Valley where a lot of people commute from. They've started commuting south. Folks from Silicon Valley now commute from down in San Benito County, redevelopments of the old Fort Ord. So you're right. A lot of times the median income doesn't match the median home prices in a lot of areas. And, you know, just a lot of what we see, and I know you guys are probably familiar with, costs have never, I've not seen costs go down. And so it's expensive to develop both on the land side and the home side. So it's hard to build entry-level housing or what's typically seen as more entry level without some kind of.
Thank you. Now, one other area. The intent of some of these council members is to have this property given to the East Bay Regional Parks. Can you tell me if that occurs, what benefit in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of tax revenue that the East Bay Regional Park will provide in comparison to this development?
Councilmember, as a bond person, I can't answer that question, but maybe there's somebody else on the team or staff that wants to address that. Understood.
I mean, this would be speculative, but I think the fact that I've never done a fiscal analysis or an economic analysis on land that is turned into open space or park is informative. And I've done quite a few fiscal impact analyses and economic impact analyses on developments, both residential and commercial. Your economic impacts for sure come from development.
Okay, well, thank you kindly, but the fact remains, East Bay Regional Park pay no taxes, they create no employment, so therefore we won't get a dime from this property being shifted to the East Bay Regional Park where some of these councilmen want. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I hope you articulate, if we do not proceed with this project, what will happen to it as it relates to $400 being given a $20 or $50 million project being probably thrown to the ashes, and $400 will acquire all four of these parcels. So I hope you articulate that. That's the end of my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor McLaughlin, I hope you got something new to say.
Yes, I do. First of all, I disagree that the general fund is not impacted because the $22.5 million on the land sale was slated to go into our general fund. Now the solution to helping the general fund is putting it in a security fund to cover the fiscal impact on the general fund. And I want to say the worst case scenario, the 30-year build out that staff and consultants have put together, which many of us believe is based on inappropriate assumptions, so we don't see it as the very worst case scenario. It projects 12 years of negative fiscal impact on the city. And just to give you an example of what that means, if you're a family and you have an 8 and 10-year-old that you're raising, you will be raising those kids, and those kids will be growing up their whole childhood in a city that is having a negative fiscal impact based on this project. Our families deserve better. They deserve a sustainable city with good services. And the way this, to me, this whole situation is really insane. You're saying the city is going to get no money for years and years. The $22.5 million gets used to plug up the general fund, and it's not going to fully plug it up. So there's going to be even further impact. And it was sold to the public as a project that was going to be bringing in this, this $22.5 million. And now that's off the table. So I am just thinking this whole scenario of trying to make this project work is insane. I'm sorry.
Council member, this analysis that's in front of you does not show a negative fiscal impact to the general fund. It just doesn't. The far column to the right shows all positive numbers.
It shows to the right.
Yeah.
It shows because you're utilizing the $22.5 million, which would have been in our general fund to give us the option of providing more services to our much needed community that needs uplift.
Okay, which will not be there if we give the project to open space. It won't be there. It's a positive net fiscal impact.
Excuse me, but did you hear me say one thing about open space? I'm talking about the figures. Please don't assume these false assumptions, whether they're with the figures or with what one of us or another one of us are saying, are inappropriate.
Okay, let's move on. Let's don't argue about this. Councilor Willis has his hand up for the first time tonight, so let's give him a shot at this.
Yeah, no, thank you. I did, following along with the conversation, there's one thing that I did want to get clarity on, and I'm wondering if y'all did an analysis on this. What does this project? Let me rephrase the question. Will this project also encourage the market value of other housing to go up within the city of Richmond?
I'm going to defer to Eric Siegel on that one, sir.
Thank you.
Eric?
That's hard to opine on. We do see in a lot of areas, again, as Councilman mentioned earlier, obviously new home developments tend to bring in higher pricing. It's just what builders and people try to target. So it kind of creates this trickle effect of, all right, well, whether it's, and these are all valid questions, whether it's 1.3 million, if that's overshooting, and it's 1.1, if it's 850,000, everything's unknown right now because it doesn't exist. It's all, you just try to imagine something that's not there, and that's what's happening throughout the Bay. So I appreciate that. I trust me, I appreciate all the concerns or the comments that have been coming in. Generally speaking, and that's always our little preface, yes, you tend to see existing homes rise just as people get forced out or unable to afford the new, they buy, the next one down, and then that just, we do see that trend, yes.
Okay, well, I'll just wrap up with a statement. I actually do appreciate that comment that we assume based on things that are not actually there. I know I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, and that's where you're hearing a lot of the frustrations is we're really just trying to assume and predict the future when really there is hardly a way to assume and predict the future. I mean, right now in the state of the world that we are right now, folks are wondering if we're going to be entering another World War III or not, and what that's going to look like for our future in general. So I'm also considering that. But just in general, there was a comment said that I agree with, and that also disturbs me, that the folks that are going to be able to actually purchase property at this development isn't going to be current folks at low income or very low income Richmond residents. It's going to be a migration of people coming in, and we've seen a huge migration of new folks coming in and folks who've had generations of living in Richmond being pushed out. So my concern is not only just for fiscal sustainability of the city, but what is it going to do to the culture and residents of the city of Richmond? What does that migration pattern look like? And based on trends that have happened elsewhere where huge developments have come in with high market rates, how that has caused this migration. And I've talked to many people over my past 10 years of doing door knocking. I have personally met several people that moved from San Francisco to Richmond because it just got too affordable to live in SF, but they came to Richmond. Also talked to many people who came back to Richmond who were forced to move out because it was too affordable for them at that time. So I just, following the conversation, and wanted to offer that comment that not only is our budget going to be based on assumptions and professional predictions, but our very low income and low income communities, communities of color, will probably also be devastated and pushed out just because this will encourage market rates to go up, which is good for the homeowners, but terrible for struggling low income renters who we're already seeing a trend of people being pushed out because of high rising housing prices. So I just wanted to offer that comment. If there's any way y'all can come back in the future with some general assumptions on these kinds of trends on how this development could encourage prices to go up and how price surges have caused the displacement of low-income people and what those price surges could potentially do to the city of Richmond in terms of what the city of Richmond's value is going to be, I would appreciate that analysis. I know it's a tall order, but like we've already heard, we're making assumptions based on the future, but at the end of the day, they're mainly assumptions. We won't really know until we get there actually having to deal with the problem. I don't know if the consultants have anything to comment or say on that based on what I said, but thank you for the enlightening information. And, I'll just end there and say thank you because I have my own frustrating feelings around this.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna try to wrap this up and send us home. And I want to start by responding to Councilmember Willis's just recent discussion. If these projections about the market for this project are anywhere near accurate, what it tells you is that there's a market for a couple of thousand homes in Richmond in the future. And if they don't get built at Point Melati, then people looking for homes in Richmond are going to go somewhere else. And where are they going to go? They're going to buy existing homes. They're going to tear them down and replace them with bigger, newer homes, or they're going to rehabilitate them. And that's going to push people out. It's a total fallacy that building new homes is going to displace people. Exactly the opposite happens. If there's a market demand for homes and you don't provide them, that's when people get pushed out. So that's my response to that. Just a couple of other things. If you're wondering why I'm so frustrated about this, I was just looking at some old records today. Nat Bates and I were elected to the city council in 1995. Now, Bates had been on the council before, but he'd also been off for 8 or 12 years. I can't remember. So we were elected in November of 1995. In October of 1995, which is like 27 years ago, the 45-member Point Melati Blue Ribbon Committee was formed to start studying and recommending a plan for the development of Point Melati 27 years ago. And I looked at the list of people who were on that committee, and I knew most, if not all of them. 2/3 of them are deceased. That tells you how long this has been going on. And I think these discussions we keep having are like point Melotti's in play. We can do it or not do it, or we can do something else, or and that's just not the case. A city council entitled this project in 2019 and entered into a binding contract with the developer. And there have been 2 lawsuits on it to date. They've both lost, and we're down to the last strokes. And we have an obligation to form this community facilities district. Everybody here's talking like, well, maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't do it. I mean, that's not an option. If you don't do it, you're going to get sued and the city's going to go bankrupt. I mean, that's the one thing that's for sure. So the last thing I want to say is that I'm amazed that we're sitting here talking about 30-year projections. Do you realize how long 30 years is? We're talking about putting yourself back into 1990 and making a 30-year projection, which would be like today, and having any confidence at all that you're anywhere near right. In 1990, homes in Richmond were selling for $150,000. Since then, we've gone through 3 decades. We've been through the Great Recession. We've been through the pandemic. And now homes in Richmond are selling for well over $1 million. Homes sell all the time in Richmond for $1.3 million. And they're gonna sell for more. Since 1990, the population of Richmond's gone up 25%. You can't look out 30 years and have any confidence at all in what you're doing. I mean, to some extent, all this is just a leap of faith. And you're either in favor of a project and you're going to take a leap of faith, or you're going to fight it with everything you have. And at the end of the day, 4 people on this city council are against this project and 3 are in favor of it. And that's the way it's going to be. And the project is going to it's already entitled. It's going to go. And either that or it's going to get sold to the Indians for to the tribe for $400. So I don't know where you guys are going with this. I just, this eternal yak, and the general fund is going to go bankrupt and blah, blah, blah. It's all baloney. So I did see Councilmember Johnson's hand up. You haven't spoken on this tonight. Do you want to say something?
No, I lowered my hand, Mr. Mayor, because like you said, this has been discussed since I was 2 years old. I mean, I guess I do have something to say. Because I raised my hand, and I'm usually not compelled to speak too much during these conversations because nothing new was ever mentioned or asked or anything like that, or even expressed. But to my surprise, something new was expressed, and that was when Councilmember McLaughlin had, corrected the individual who, had made the statement about what they believed she wanted. And I do understand, I hear that frustration, and I not only hear it, I understand that frustration when somebody tries to tell you what you want and what you believe without even asking you. And so I guess for me, I just wanted to, provide the opportunity to those who have, been constantly putting this into question. If everything did check out, with the 30-year, with the 30-year lookout and, making sure that nothing, blew back on the general fund, would this be a project that you could get behind? Because if that's the, where do we find our win? Because if that's the case, then let's get there. But if the objective is in case to kill the project, be bold and say it. Let's not keep us here all night, and let's not keep doing this and keep going through this. I was actually raised here in Richmond, where you have to do what you say and mean what you do. And I'm not seeing a lot of that. If you actually believe, that this project, and the jobs that this project is going to create, and that you can make this project something that Richmond is worth having in Richmond, that's one thing. And it's our hands are pretty much already tied. I understand that people want to do more research and get more data, but May is literally around the corner. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do you not see from other people's perspective that these are delaying tactics, trying to be applied? Like, I'm pretty sure that like the cognitive dissonance isn't that great. Like I'm almost certain that you see how some of these questions and some of these requests that you're asking can be interpreted as delaying tactics or tactics being used to try as an attempt to try to kill the project. But if there is if that is not the case, where is the win? Where is the where can we, like meet in the middle and get this project done without, any negative repercussions to the city or its residents? Like that, all I hear is like why it can't happen and why or why it should happen. Like we have judgments, we have settlements. Like I come from a place where when the judge says something, that's what goes. So please help me understand, like, what is the end game? What is the end game? Because if it's not to kill the project, as you've corrected individuals by saying, what is in fact the end game? If we have this tight deadline around the corner and we don't have all of this time to do to do 30-year, a whole 30-year lookout, like what is the end game? Because we don't have the time. We time is not on our side. Time is not on our side. Neither are these judgments. Nothing is actually on your side. And the arguments that you're making, the consultants are coming back and saying, actually, that's not the case. I respect your ability, your agency to disagree with it, but you disagreeing without any facts, and that's just an opinion at that point. And so for me, it's just like, what's the end game? What's the goal here? Like, how do we, like, if you are truly not trying to kill the project, and we know that we have until May 21st, what are you truly trying to accomplish within these short few weeks before we absolutely lose complete control of this project in this space? What then becomes the goal?
Okay, well, let's don't start a whole new debate. I think unless there are any objections, I would like to adjourn this meeting.
It was really just for something for people to just chew on and think about, because I'm not even certain if people have asked themselves that question. Like, what is my end goal? Not what someone else has told me my end goal is, but what is my end goal? I think that's something that we should all just take some time to think about, because one week it's no building in Point Melody. Then the next week it's, we have to make sure that we can build there, but there's no negative impact on the general fund. It changes so much that I'm just trying to at least get us to take some time with ourselves, not with anybody else. Cancel out all of the, all of the voices and stuff like that, and ask yourself, what are you truly trying to accomplish before May 21st with this?
Okay, well, let's all go pour a drink and ponder it. Again, if there's no objections, I would like to adjourn this meeting.
Can I say something about?
No, you talked too much already.
Okay, I will answer. I will send my questions. The leap of it's not a leap of faith.
You go ahead, Counselor. Go ahead. But I don't know what else there is to say. You guys don't want the project. We want it. And I mean, why do we just keep yakking about it? But go ahead.
And if it's a response to my question, please feel free to call or text me. I don't want to keep anyone up past any amount of time. I don't want, people always accuse us of like showboating and stuff like that. Councilmember Jimenez, you can call me and we can talk about this, and you can let me know I don't.
No, it's not. I don't want to start a fight. That. And I am not going to talk because here I think women of color don't have the voice. So in this meeting.
Okay, we've been at this for 3.5 hours, and we only have one thing on the agenda. So again, if there are no objections, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, blessed.
Good night, everyone.